of mourning.
Suffering and neglected medical intervention that might have saved lives. She fended off the criticism. She said poverty meant people had fewer obstacles to knowing God, and politics was for others.
I'm joined now on the line from Delhi by our correspondent Daniel Lack. Daniel, we've been hearing that crowds have been coming out into the centre of the city, rather like the same thing that's happening here in London in relation to Princess Diana. What is the scene there?
From what we hear, some of the city's poor and many other people too are pouring out to stand in front of the headquarters of the Missionaries of Charity, in front of Mother House, which was also Mother Teresa's home and the place where she died. They've come to say their final namastes. Their hands clasped together in front of their chests and say farewell to Mother Teresa. Most of them are Hindus. All of them are her supporters, quite clearly. Many of them are in tears, we're hearing as well. The Chief Minister of West Bengal State, of which Calcutta is the capital, Jyoti Basu, has offered her a state funeral. We've yet to hear whether that offer's been accepted. But there is an outpouring of grief here in India, in Calcutta and in other parts of the country.
You've heard it described as a near saint. I mean, you make the point that India is a Hindu country, but and obviously Mother Teresa was a Roman Catholic. But was she revered in a way sort of above and beyond denomination?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think India, you know, she's been here for so long now. She's an Indian citizen. She came well before independence in 1947 to do her work, to teach originally, and then to do her work. So she's regarded by India as one of theirs. She is part of this country. She's received the highest civilian award in India. The Prime Minister here, Mr. Gujral, his reaction came very early on to her death. He said, "Words fail me. She brought love, peace, and joy to those usually shunned by society." And accolades as well from the opposition BJP, the Hindu Nationalist Party, which actually described her in the same terms as Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma means great soul, and they used that word to refer to Mother Teresa tonight. So grief across the political spectrum.
What has she changed? What has changed as a result of Mother Teresa in the endemic poverty that there is?
I think probably if you were a development expert or something, you might say, well, not a lot, because her approach was not to change the root cause of poverty, but to give dignity to people who were in poverty. And the fact that people are out on the streets of Calcutta tonight show that she succeeded in that people feel they can come out and they can mourn the passing of someone. But not just that, her order lives on, the work she does lives on. She was looking at expanding her work even as she was ill a couple of months ago. I mean, she is apparently, according to the newspapers here, thinking of expanding her work into working with AIDS victims, something she may have been inspired to through recent meetings in New York with the Princess of Wales when the two of them were there. They were known to contact each other. They stayed in touch. Mother Teresa is said to have inspired the Princess, and latterly the Princess was said to have inspired Mother Teresa.
Daniel Lack, thank you for joining us. And joining me now in the studio is Father Alexander Sherbrooke from the parish of St Margaret's in Twickenham, just outside London. Father, you knew her as a person. People are already talking of her as a near saint. What was she like as a person?
She was remarkably simple, very straightforward, very matter-of-fact. She had no time for small talk. Her only concern was, first of all, for your comfort as a priest coming to visit, and then the work of her sisters. And the work of her sisters was always to go to the poorest of the poor, to see in them the person of Christ, and to bring the love of Christ to them.
But what was it about her that made her work actually have an effect, that captured the imagination of the world, that made the condition of the poor less wretched? There must be many nuns like her who aspire to the same thing, but what made the difference?
We would interpret it as that God chose her. God chose her with a particular charism, and that he asked her to go and, as she always said, to satiate the thirst of Jesus in the poorest of the poor.
Did God give her a tough constitution and a stubborn streak as well?
Oh, she was stubborn. She was stubborn and she was tough, and she was someone who was remarkably resilient. She would always, as I was saying before, take enormous care looking after people at the expense of her own comfort, at the expense of her own sleep. She was always the first one in the chapel. She was always the first one to get her hands dirty, as it were. She was the last one to bed at night. Remarkable constitution.
Father, thank you indeed for joining us. And from Rome, I'm joined by our correspondent there, ORLA GUERIN. ORLA, she was described as the best known Roman Catholic after, of course, the Pope. How is her death being received in Rome?
Well, the news of her death has been greeted with great sadness by the Pope himself. A spokesman within the past half an hour or so has given us his reaction. He said the Pope was deeply saddened, deeply moved when he heard news of the death, which had been passed on to him immediately. He had gone straight to his chapel to pray. There had been a very special relationship, a kind of affinity and quite an open and public affection between the two of them. The Pope said this evening in his reaction that he believed she was somebody who had made a special mark on the century, who had earned her place in history, and somebody who he believed had shown in a very public way how the love of God could be transformed into the love of one's neighbour. He paid tribute to her as somebody who had devoted her life to the care of the poor and the most desperate and the most needy in society.
This, of course, has been a papacy that has polarized many people, many of the Roman Catholic faithful. It's seen as a very conservative, dogmatically conservative papacy. Mother Teresa was very much, if I can put it that way, on that wing, was she not?
She fitted in very much with the Pope's stance, and they did share a lot of characteristics, both, if you like, very conservative on theological matters, and both with a very strong and very determined social conscience, both very anxious to put the care of the poor and the position of the most desperate and the most needy at the forefront in society. She and he did have a lot in common. They both had a very public and very vehement opposition to abortion, and that is an issue about which the Holy Father often speaks, and one which is foremost in his mind. She had referred to it as the greatest destroyer of world peace, and that's the kind of sentiment that he himself uses. She had also, we know, been a kind of emissary for him, if you like. She had volunteered to carry messages for him in the past to countries that he had been unable to visit, to her own homeland, Albania, before his trip there in 1993.
And indeed, she carried the message worldwide. ORLA, GUERIN, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Back finally to our main...
A tiny, tireless woman who devoted her life to the poor and the suffering. Mother Teresa, the saint of the gutters, dead at age 87. Hello and welcome. The world was mourning a beautiful princess. Now it will remember a very different woman, a wizened old nun with an unpronounceable name, Agnes Honja Boyaju. Mother Teresa, the founder of the Missionaries of Charity, died of cardiac arrest Friday at her convent in Calcutta. She was 87. On our program today, a look at a unique life now ended.
Love and to serve the poor.
The woman known as the living saint is dead. Mother Teresa, a Roman Catholic nun, began her crusade in the early 1950s by serving the poorest of the poor in Calcutta, India. Born to a middle-class Albanian family, Mother Teresa said she was inspired to become a nun and come to Calcutta after she heard wonderful accounts about its people from a Jesuit priest she knew.
There were a group of Yugoslav Jesuits who were serving in and around Calcutta. And their stories home, their letters home, fired her imagination.
All her life, Mother Teresa had sheltered orphans abandoned in garbage dumps, comforted the insane, cleaned the ulcers of lepers, rescued destitute old people dying in the gutters. Many called her saint of the gutters. She believed there was no disease worse than the feeling of being unwanted. Mother Teresa made it her calling to give hope to the sick and the abandoned, to heal the wounds of despair, to restore their dignity, stolen by an uncaring, cruel world. For Mother Teresa, caring for the poor and the diseased was much more than social service. It was a holy mission to serve Jesus Christ. As she once said, in the slums, in the broken body, in the children, she saw Christ. She touched him.
Love is very powerful when it comes as a love for God. God's love in action.
Mother Teresa opened her arms to all, Christians, Hindus, Muslims. She cared for the victims of the world, the disadvantaged in India, the hungry in Africa, the earthquake victims in Central Asia, the AIDS patients in America. And she traveled from the gutters of Calcutta to the ghettos of New York to the slums of her native Albania. For her years of work, in 1979, Mother Teresa won the Nobel Peace Prize. She once said, Give the poor not only your care, but also your heart. Give until it hurts, because real love hurts. She suffered 2 heart attacks. The one in 1989 was nearly fatal. Since then, she had been on a pacemaker. She struggled for life on her 86th birthday in the intensive coronary care unit in a Calcutta hospital. To the world, Mother Teresa was an angel of mercy. But one British television documentary called her Hell's Angel, accusing her of manipulating donations even out of dictators.
She said, I take no salary, no church assistance, no government grant, nothing. I have never asked for money. But in all conscience, who am I to refuse if somebody gives me money for my work?
Mother Teresa leaves behind a congregation, the Missionaries of Charity that she founded in 1950 to carry on her cause. They have branches in over 100 countries. Wherever she went, Mother Teresa blazed a trail of hope in a world darkened by death, destruction, disease, and despair. The world will miss her, and many Roman Catholics around the globe hope the Vatican will canonize her, so that in death she becomes a saint.
Not so much to be understood as to understand, not so much to be loved as to love, for it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in dying that we are born again to eternal life. So let us be one heart, full of love in the heart of God. And so share the joy of loving by sharing, helping, loving, serving each other. So let us pray that God's blessing be with us all. God bless you all.
Welcome back. Mother Teresa was born in Skopje in what is now Macedonia, but India was her adopted home, and Indian political and social leaders are mourning her as one of their own. So are millions of Indians of all faiths, whether they're Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, or Buddhist. Indian Prime Minister Inder Kumar Gujral said, "Words fail me to express my sorrow." Reaction is pouring in from around the world as well. The Vatican says Pope John Paul II was quickly informed of Mother Teresa's death and was deeply hurt. He immediately prayed for her. He plans to celebrate a mass in her memory on Saturday at Castel Gandolfo, his summer residence. A Vatican spokesman says the Pope deeply appreciated the nuns' commitment to the poor. The President and First Lady of the United States, Bill and Hillary Clinton, learned of the news a short while ago as well. Mr. Clinton said the world had lost, in his words, one of the giants of our time. He noted that Mother Teresa had worked with his wife Hillary to open a home for abandoned babies in Washington, and that both Mrs. Clinton and their daughter Chelsea had witnessed the nuns' good work in India. We're joined now on the phone from Calcutta by ITN reporter Ian Williams. Can you tell us about the presence of Mother Teresa and her mission in that extraordinary city?
Well, this is very much the home of Mother Teresa, although she was born in Albania. This is the heart of where she has her mission. This is where she has a series of homes, hospices for the dying, for the destitute, for abandoned children. This is very much the city which she adopted and which adopted her, and where the grief is already beginning to be shown on the streets.
What time is it there now, and how much of the news has spread?
It's now 2:30 in the morning, and already there are hundreds of people gathering outside the mission house, her home, the place from which her nuns, her sisters would spread to the various hospices and homes which they ran. Reports we've heard are that the police initially tried to keep them back out of respect because the sisters and her supporters were holding a mass after the news of the death, which was at 9:30 this evening. but since then they've been allowed to the mission, they've been allowed to show their respects, and it's expected that many thousands will go to the mission over the coming hours.
Now, when those of us far away think of Mother Teresa, we think, of course, of Calcutta. What has her impact been on the city? How many homes does the mission operate there?
Well, the mission operates in a number of areas. The ones which are most prominent here are a hospice for the dying, home for the homeless, for the destitute, for children, abandoned children, for leprosy victims. It really is charities of many different sorts, and I think that one of the ways that Mother Teresa made her mark here is by showing that no cause was beyond her, that the poor and the destitute should be helped, and she regarded it as her duty to help them.
Ian Williams, ITN journalist in Calcutta. Thanks very much. The Missionaries of Charity began there as an order with just 12 members. It now has more than 2,500 nuns operating 400 homes in India and Africa, Europe, the Americas, and Australia. Joining us now to talk about the order and its founder is Robert Moynihan. He's the editor of the journal Inside the Vatican. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
She was famous around the world, but she has touched people's lives, and I'm told that she touched yours as well.
Yes. In 1987, in Rome, I met Mother Teresa with my wife. She'd been asking me on a number of occasions to visit Mother Teresa, and we went to her convent where every morning she has Mass, or had Mass, and prayed, and received people who had petitions for her and asked her to pray for them. My wife wanted not a prayer for herself or for us, but a prayer for her brother, who was trying for many years to have a child and was unable to. And she spoke briefly with Mother Teresa, explained that, and Mother Teresa embraced her and said, "I will pray for your brother," and gave us a number of medals. You see these medals that she hands out, holy medals of the Virgin Mary. She gave us several of those. We gave one to my wife's brother. Many years passed. My wife prayed, and her brother and sister-in-law never conceived a child. But then they decided to adopt a child. They visited China. They received a child. They have a child now from China who has been with the family for about 3 years, a beautiful child. And in a sense, I believe Mother Teresa's prayers were fulfilled, were answered, but not in a way that anyone expected.
Let me ask you about her other good works. The Missionaries of Charity are an enormous organization. Tell us about it.
Well, it's a remarkable organization and, in a certain sense, countercultural. Someone once asked Mother Teresa who administered her organization. She said, "It is administered by divine providence." She said, "To prove our faith in providence, we refuse any type of permanent funding. They don't even have a bank account. They don't have loans, salaries, or subsidies. We also discourage persons or organizations from contributing on a regular basis, monthly or weekly or annually. Of course, a regular income would help us," she said, "but then we could no longer call ourselves Daughters of Providence." So it's a massive organization without any of the structures that we normally would expect in such an organization.
How hard was it for her as a young nun to break away from her own order and found a new one? Is that an option that's open to a lot of young women within the church?
It was rather difficult, and she suffered greatly. And in fact, for many years, she was considered far out, excessive. She was she was born into a wealthy family in Albania. She was a well-educated young woman. She went to India. She was a teacher in a religious order where she was highly respected as a teacher. She was in air-conditioned offices. She was responsible for many schools and many children. But suddenly she felt a deeper call. She left the air-conditioned offices. She went out and worked in terrible heat, and her entire life changed. And she, bit by bit, received the support of those around her, but the beginnings were very difficult.
What about her later years? Can you tell us about her relationship with the Vatican and with the Pope?
she's very close to the Pope. She was in Rome in June after she was in America visiting New York, where she, in fact, met with Princess Diana. And I think during the course of these hours, you're showing film of that meeting. She often met with Diana, as a matter of fact. And Diana would sometimes go, as I did, early in the morning to speak with her about spiritual matters. Few people know that. And the Pope embraced her in Rome. The Pope marvels at the things she's accomplished. And she's the only person who has been allowed to establish a homeless center, a type of soup kitchen, if you will, inside the Vatican itself. On the very corner next to what was once called the Holy Office of the Inquisition, there is a house of Mother Teresa and her nuns.
A tribute that will survive her. Robert Moynihan, editor of Inside the Vatican. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We've said it before, Mother Teresa has touched so many people. She has brought the attention of so many people. Dominique Lapierre has written City of Joy, a book about her and her good works in Calcutta. He joins us now on the line from Paris. Did Mother Teresa ever succeed in changing the terrible poverty in Calcutta? Has she had much of an impact there?
She did, because what is extraordinary with Mother Teresa is that her message was a message to everybody, telling we can change things, we can bring some justice, we can bring some love, compassion. She was a symbol, and so many people after Mother Teresa started to work for the poorest of the poor, and she did change things, yes, indeed, and not only in Calcutta. Calcutta was her starting point, but she really went to the whole world. And our message was not only, you know, we must help the poor who do not have enough food, who do not have shelter, but also those in the Western world who suffer from solitude, who do not have a fraternal hand on their head. And this was also a great message for us in the Western world, where we live, you know, with so much poverty around ourselves, but not only physical poverty, but spiritual poverty. She said that loneliness is the greatest disease in the Western world.
Now, we just heard that in the early days of the Missionaries of Charity, the Vatican and the church hierarchy regarded her as eccentric. How was she regarded by Indian authorities when she began her work?
Well, she had a lot of problems when she began to work, because the Indians did not like so much this Western woman there with a white skin advertising too much about Indian poverty. And then they realized she was a holy woman. And in India, everything with a sacred dimension has an enormous importance, and she's really revered in India as she's revered in the rest of the world. And certainly today, tonight, in Calcutta, the people of that great disaster city feel that they are orphans because their great mother has gone.
Now, you have spent so much time in Calcutta. Is it the kind of city that would make a young woman or anyone else feel that they could change the world, that they could accomplish great things, that they could succeed in alleviating human suffering?
Definitely. Mother Teresa said one day, saving one child is saving the world. And this is really something which struck me personally when I followed her in those slums, you know. And she would exhaust everybody. She had an energy you cannot imagine. She would sleep 4 hours at night. She would eat only a banana or just a plate of rice. But she would exhaust everyone around her. She would have an eye open to all miseries. She would know how to talk to a leper, make him feel that he's not alone, make him feel he's loved. This was extraordinary, and it really gave me the impression that things were changing in the path of this bended woman in a white sari with this blue border there. It was such a symbol of love, you know. You would want to walk behind her in those streets of Calcutta and watch the faces of the people. They felt that they were not alone anymore.
Author Dominique Lapierre, thanks very much. Noel IRWIN-HENSCHEL is one woman who was inspired to put her energies into charity after a meeting with Mother Teresa. She joins us now from our Los Angeles studios. Thanks so much for being with us. Can you tell us about the impact that extraordinary woman had on you?
Yes, Mother Teresa, I met her in September of 1988, and that was a turning point in my life. I was attending a YPO conference in New Delhi, which was with 400 business people, and she said that if each one of you would use the same drive that you use to build your businesses, and you'd use that to help others, just think what a difference that could make for a better world for all. And that is what inspired me to start the NOEL Foundation, because of Mother Teresa and her example that she had led in the world of helping people throughout the world.
Now, you had another visit with her, a few, I take it. One of them stands out in the description that I've received of it because it was the same day that the late Princess of Wales was visiting with her as well. Can you tell us about that day?
That was on June 18, 1997, this year. And I traveled to New York to visit with Mother Teresa at the Bronx, at her home in the Bronx, the Missionaries of Charity there. And as I was arriving, Princess Diana was leaving, and I had the wonderful opportunity to spend more time with Mother Teresa, and for she and I to be able to have Mass together and to say the Rosary together. And she spoke about how she was very fond of Princess Diana and all the work that she was doing.
What was it like for someone like you who had not known her to, over time, get to know her? What was her friendship like? What was she like as a woman?
Mother Teresa had a profound effect on me, and she was an inspiration. I think that she's an example to all people of the world, and she has taught all of us. She used to say that what I can do, you cannot do. What you can do, I cannot do. But together we can do great things to make a better world for all. And I think it's so important that people throughout the world think and reflect, what can each one of us do, just in some small way. Mother Teresa also always said that charity begins at home. It's important for us to work with our families and to help our families and to help the people in our businesses, our staff, and to help our community. She said that every person needs to find their own Calcutta. And I think that the message that she has given to the world, and I was very blessed to have personal time with Mother Teresa, but the message that she has given to the entire world will continue through the Missionaries of Charity. Most people, when they think of her, they don't realize that she has 558 homes throughout the world, 40 in the United States, and they're helping people that are most in need. And I think that was a profound effect that she has had on me, is how can I as a business person do something in my own way to be able to give back and to help others.
Noel IRWIN-HENSCHEL, thanks so much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
So many lives touched. RAVI ZACHARIAS, who is a Christian evangelist, has had his own spiritual connection with Mother Teresa. I want to ask you about that, because when we think of India, we think of a Hindu nation, we think of a Muslim nation, a place of many religions. What was the place that Mother Teresa found for herself and for Christianity there?
I think that's very key. When you go back to the very time in which she framed her work there in the late 40s, when India was just coming into her own with her independence, and in a city where the temple of Kali was literally right beside where she built her home called Nirmal Hriday, which literally means tender heart home. I think the only way to describe it is that she earned the right to be heard by a life that was beautifully lived. Passions run deep in India, religious passion, religious fervor, and especially in a city like Calcutta. It is one of the most teeming cities in the world. No matter how much you prepare for it, when you arrive there, you're overcome by just the volume of need to know that this diminutive woman...
Gandhihain ein bleibendes Denkmal gesetzt. In einer Welt voller Hoffnungslosigkeit und Elend standen ihr Name und ihr Wirken im Zeichen der Menschlichkeit.
Nun der Sport mit Jasmin.
40, 50 years older than he really was. He was being fed by a dropper, given some nourishment. And my comment was that it probably was the first time in his life, from the time he was a baby, that anybody put their arms around him. This was the impact of Mother Teresa, I think, the fact that she touched lives. She lived a life in the midst of so many passions and convictions. And if you went to her home at any time, there was a lineup of rickshaw pullers, of taxi drivers, of street cleaners, waiting just to bow down and touch her feet. It's a great tribute, and that's why justifiably she received the highest civilian order ever given by the Indian government.
RAVI ZACHARIAS, we thank you. We leave you now with a final look at some of the images that made up the ordinary life of an extraordinary woman. I'm Jonathan Mann. Thanks for joining us.
We can all together proclaim the joy of spreading peace, the joy of loving one another, and the joy acknowledging that the poorest of the poor are our brothers and sisters.
And when you pray, please pray for all the missionaries of charity that we may be able to continue God's work with great love.
Byer. De støtter blant annet skoler, sykehus, barnehjem og gir fattige tak over hodet, mat og kjærlighet. Forrige uke ble hun feiret da hun fylte 87 år. Hun hadde flere hjerteattakk de siste årene, men hennes skrantende helse hindret henne ikke i å ha omsorg for de fattige. Mor Teresa mottok en rekke ordener for sitt arbeid, og hun kom til Norge for å få Nobels fredspris i 1979. Selv mente hun at hun ikke var prisen verdig, og at hennes hjelp var en dråpe i et hav av lidelse. Pave Johannes Paul II sier i kveld at han er svært trist over nyheten om mor Teresas død, og den indiske statsministeren sier at India blir fattigere uten henne. Mor Teresa møtte prinsesse Diana flere ganger, og hun ble svært sjokkert over hennes bortgang. Hun roste hennes engasjement på denne måten.
To help me with the work, very anxious.
Vi skal til London, og for i Londons gater er også nå i kveld fulle av mennesker.
Some bringing Mother Teresa and her work to public attention.
For all kinds of diseases, there are medicines and cures. But for being unwanted, except there are willing hands to serve them, and there is a loving heart to love them, I don't think that disease, that terrible disease, can ever be cured.
As her order, the Missionaries of Charity, expanded well beyond India, eventually to open homes in more than 100 countries, international recognition gathered momentum too. In 1979, Mother Teresa accepted the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of those she sought to help.
I am grateful, and I'm very happy to receive it in the name of the hungry, of the naked, of the homeless, of the crippled, of the blind, of the lepers, of all those people who feel unwanted, unloved, uncared, throw away of the society, people who have become a burden to the society and are shunned by everybody. In their name, I accept the award.
There were tributes from the city of Dublin, where Mother Teresa had first trained as a nun. The Queen presented her with the Order of Merit. Others, though, questioned her willingness to meet dictators like Enver Hoxha of Albania, on whose grave she later laid a wreath. But when she received communion from Pope John Paul in Albania, as it moved away from being officially an atheist state, Mother Teresa said it showed that no one could ever abolish God. Some saw her as an ambassador for the highly politicized pontificate, in her fervent crusade against contraception and abortion.
Every abortion is a double killing. It's the killing of the child and killing of the conscience of the mother.
Some, too, felt Mother Teresa failed to exploit the influence she enjoyed to press for political change that might have made her work with the destitute and dying less necessary. She was challenged over whether she gave an undue nobility to suffering and neglected medical intervention that might have saved lives. She fended off the criticism. She said poverty meant people had fewer obstacles to knowing God, and politics was for others.
Well, I'm joined now on the line from Delhi by Untitled Chapter, special correspondent in Calcutta for the Times of India newspaper. Mr. Chatterjee, what is the reaction in India at the moment to the death of Mother Teresa?
Well, the reaction can be gauged from the very fact that in Calcutta itself, from where I'm speaking, hundreds and hundreds of people are there descending on the Mother House on Lower Secular Road. They can't quite believe it, although, every time she fell ill, they thought, this was the time probably she would be going, but they're all hoping every time that she would not. And this time she has, and it has certainly left them very shocked.
She was born in Albania. She had a world status, but did India really feel she belonged to India?
Oh, yes, certainly. I mean, even here, the television channel, local channel, which shuts off much, much earlier, well, it's still very much on, and the kind of songs that are being sung are the songs of mourning that are generally being sung for, national leaders who die, and with the national mourning is sort of declared. She was very much a person of Calcutta. I mean, Calcutta possessed her. I mean, they knew she was one of the proudest possessions, and she got India's highest honor. I mean, she got everything. She struggled very hard in all her life just to help those who struggled even more to survive. And,
Mr. Chatterjee, thank you very much indeed for joining us from India. Our correspondent ORLA GUERIN joined me from Rome a short while ago, and I asked her to describe the reaction to Mother Teresa's death in Rome.
The news of her death has been greeted with great sadness by the Pope himself. A spokesman within the past half an hour or so has given us his reaction. He said the Pope was deeply saddened, deeply moved when he heard news of the death, which had been passed on to him immediately. He had gone straight to his chapel to pray. There had been a very special relationship, a kind of affinity and quite an open and public affection between the two of them. The Pope said this evening in his reaction that he believed she was somebody who had made a special mark on the century, who had earned her place in history, and somebody who he believed had shown in a very public way how the love of God could be transformed into the love of one's neighbour. He paid tribute to her as somebody who had devoted her life to the care of the poor and the most desperate and the most needy in society.
This, of course, has been a papacy that has polarized many people, many of the Roman Catholic faithful. It's seen as a very conservative, dogmatically conservative papacy. Mother Teresa was very much, if I can put it that way, on that wing, was she not?
She fitted in very much with the Pope's stance, and they did share a lot of characteristics, both, if you like, very conservative on theological matters, and both with a very strong and very determined social conscience, both very anxious to put the care of the poor and the position of the most desperate and the most needy at the forefront in society. She and he did have a lot in common. They both had a very public and very vehement opposition to abortion, and that is an issue about which the Holy Father often speaks, and one which is foremost in his mind. She had referred to it as the greatest destroyer of world peace, and that's the kind of sentiment that he himself uses.
Coming up in a moment.
L'incio della famiglia. Dio benedice le famiglie che sono unite, dove ci si ama l'un l'altro, come Dio ama tutti noi. Le famiglie che attraverso l'amore vivono nella pace, nella gioia e nell'unità.
E Giovanni Paolo II celebrerà sabato mattina a Castel Gandolfo una messa alla memoria di Madre Teresa. Il Papa aveva visitato la casa dei moribondi da lei creata a Calcutta, poi la religiosa aveva accompagnato il pontefice nel suo viaggio in Albania dell'aprile del 93.
Sì, non riusciamo a trovare le parole giuste per uno dei più grandi testimoni di questo secolo che ci lascia in una sera di fine estate, frastornati da tante, troppe notizie. Di una cosa, infatti, siamo sicuri: Madre Teresa non amava la retorica e non vorrebbe essere ricordata con paroloni vuoti e facce da funerale. La sua immagine rugosa, sorridente, solare, è tutta la sua vita, il suo messaggio. I poveri, anzi, gli ultimi tra i poveri, cuore del mondo. La vita, la dignità di ogni vita, la più calpestata, abbandonata, reietta, ha un significato incancellabile, incalcolabile. Icona vivente, in contraddizione con il cinismo, le iperboli, i miti, le monete sonanti, le apparenze del nostro tempo, con il suo sari e il suo sorriso ha messo in crisi potenti e capi di Stato senza scomunicare nessuno. Segno dei tempi e nel tempo, sfida ai nostri luoghi comuni, alle nostre ipocrisie, al nostro perbenismo. Stupore e sorriso di Dio dai sotterranei della storia lascia alla nostra coscienza poche, semplici parole. Trova il tempo di pensare, trova il tempo di pregare, trova il tempo di ridere.
E veniamo alla morte di Lady Diana e Dodi Al-Fayed. Sono stati...
I'm Judy Woodruff in Washington. The world mourns the passing of Mother Teresa, whose life of charity offered a timeless lesson in love.
This is CNN World View, including reports from Brian Jenkins, New York, Mother Teresa's Mission of Mercy.
Thank you for joining us. It happened less than 3 months ago at a convent in the Bronx, New York. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Mother Teresa is helped down the steps by Princess Diana. It was not the first meeting between the two, and now the world mourns them both. Mother Teresa died Friday of cardiac arrest. She was 87. CNN's Richard Blystone looks back now at her life and her legacy.
She was out of step with some of the most popular values of her time. Where the world enthroned statuesque beauty, she was 4 feet 11. Among them, the notion that feeding the...
is a terrible evil. And if you do not want the child, I want it. Give it to me.
Among think about death? Not really, she said. I see so much of it. Richard Blystone, CNN reporting.
Reaction to the death of Mother Teresa is coming in from around the world. A Vatican spokesman says the Pope believes she is a woman who has left her mark on the history of this century. In Washington, a short time ago, bells tolled for Mother Teresa at the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. And the United States House of Representatives observed a moment of silence in her honor and memory. President Clinton said she showed us the power of simple humility.
With the passing of Mother Teresa, the world has lost one of the giants of our time. She served the poor, the suffering, and the dying. And in so doing, she served as an inspiration and a challenge to all the rest of us.
Mother Teresa's funeral will be on Wednesday, next Wednesday, September the 10th in Calcutta. We will have more on her death later on Worldview, including a live report from one of her missions in New York City. Now to London and to Bernie. We're having some technical difficulties with the satellite from London, where Bernie Shaw is. If we will bring him back and get that fixed just as quickly as we can. As we reported a short time ago, dead today, Mother Teresa at the age of 87. She died of a heart attack in Calcutta, where her mission was headquartered. Her work began in India, but it spread around the world. Ahead on Worldview, Mother Teresa is remembered by people who carried out her work in New York City. Also ahead, the crew of the Russian space station...
Non amava la retorica e non vorrebbe essere ricordata con paroloni vuoti e facce da funerale. La sua immagine rugosa, sorridente, solare è tutta la sua vita, il suo messaggio. I poveri, anzi, gli ultimi tra i poveri, cuore del mondo. La vita, la dignità di ogni vita, la più calpestata, abbandonata, reietta, ha un significato incancellabile, incalcolabile. icona vivente in contraddizione con il cinismo, le iperboli, i miti, le monete sonanti, le apparenze del nostro tempo. Con il suo sari e il suo sorriso ha messo in crisi potenti e capi di Stato senza scomunicare nessuno. Segno dei tempi e nel tempo, sfida ai nostri luoghi comuni, alle nostre ipocrisie, al nostro perbenismo. Stupore e sorriso di Dio dai sotterranei della storia lascia alla nostra coscienza poche, semplici parole. Trova il tempo di pensare, trova il tempo di pregare, trova il tempo di ridere.
Veniamo adesso alla tragica morte di Lady Diana e Dodi Al-Fayed, criminati per omicidio.
There are willing hands to serve them, and there's a loving heart to love them. I don't think that this is...
Expanded well beyond India, eventually to open homes in more than 100.
Her spirit filled the world as she dedicated her life to end the suffering of others. Follow the news of the death of Mother Teresa on CNN International.
Returning to our top stories today, the death today of Mother Teresa in Calcutta. We believe we have some pictures now of Mother Teresa's body lying in state in Calcutta. We believe this is the home mission of her missionaries of charity, again in Calcutta. Her funeral, we're told, will be held next Wednesday, September 10th in Calcutta. That's the 51st anniversary of the day Mother Teresa said she received a divine message from God, telling her to devote her life to the poor. Again, Mother Teresa dead today at the age of 87. She was a nun who was known for her work for the poor. She founded the Missionaries of Charity, an order of nuns dedicated to that purpose. CNN's Brian Jenkins joins us now from the Order's Center in New York City. Brian.
Judy, New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani came to speak to us just a few minutes ago to the assembled TV cameras you see behind me here in front of the Missionaries of Charity building here in the South Bronx. The mayor expressed his condolences. He had arrived here about 45 minutes ago and had gone inside to speak to the group of about 25 nuns who live and work from this house. This is one of about 37 houses that Mother Teresa's order has in the United States. They deal primarily in providing shelter and food for homeless men and women. The nuns inside did hold a mass this afternoon, a private mass, and a sister from the order came out to express the group's feelings a short time ago. The crowd that began to form here about 3 hours ago has been rather curious about the situation. Many of them found out that Mother Teresa had passed on today because media began arriving here. Many people came to lay flowers outside the mission building. It evoked memories, of course, of the thousands upon thousands of bouquets that have been laid out on sidewalks around Great Britain this week in honor of Princess Diana. Now, the crowd here, as I said, has been curious, but there's a great deal of sadness, too, because Mother Teresa was revered in this neighborhood. It's a largely Hispanic neighborhood in the South Bronx, made up of people from Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, mainly Roman Catholic population here in the South Bronx, and they did tremendous admiration for this. And all the people we talked to thought a great deal of the work her mission did here.
Here in the Bronx, we have a men's shelter here, and we have a soup kitchen. Sisters teach religious instruction. They visit the senior citizens over here, you know, and just make their presence felt.
I thought she was a saint. I mean, I know that she gave so much and she did so much for the poor and the needy and the sick. That is replaceable. It's just too much of a loss.
Everybody come to see her and have a blessed. Everybody feel good like myself. When she bless you, you feel like a new person. Feel like nothing happened to you, you're sad. That's what I said.
The lady has earned her keep, and I'm sure she's in the arms of the Lord.
She was a good woman, and I want to give her this for teaching me to go to heaven.
That was 8-year-old Alex Santana. He goes to 3rd grade at a school nearby. He says he never met Mother Teresa, but he saw her, and that was enough for him. Judy?
Brian Jenkins in New York, thanks. Very touching from that young man. Well, we do have our signal back from London and from my colleague Bernard Shaw. Bernie, are you there?
Yes, Judy, it's good to be with you. I should...
She was the first one to get her hands dirty, as it were. She was the last one to bed at night. Remarkable constitution.
Mother Teresa, who died today. Athens has been chosen to host...
Aussi sur la victoire d'Athènes, la ville accueillera les Jeux Olympiques en 2004. C'est Jean-Paul II qui a été ce soir l'un des premiers à réagir à la mort de Mère Teresa. Il a fait part de sa profonde douleur et d'une grande émotion. Le pape célébrera d'ailleurs dès demain matin une messe à sa mémoire. Mère Teresa était âgée de 87 ans. Malgré de nombreuses alertes cardiaques, elle n'avait accepté que récemment de prendre une semi-retraite. Elle avait choisi de consacrer sa vie aux plus pauvres des pauvres, un engagement qui remonte au début des années 50. Stéphanie Pérez.
Mère Teresa avait été la première à rendre hommage à Lady Diana. Elles disparaissent à quelques jours d'intervalle. Deux figures de l'histoire contemporaine qui s'étaient fait aimer et reconnaître pour leur combat en faveur des plus démunis. La religieuse s'est éteinte dans son couvent à Calcutta à l'âge de 87 ans, des suites d'un arrêt cardiaque. Maintes fois hospitalisée, elle était passée très près de la mort en novembre dernier, sauvée par une opération du cœur qu'elle avait d'abord refusée, préférant mourir en paix. Ce soir, les missionnaires de la Charité, l'ordre qu'elle avait fondé il y a 47 ans, prient pour elle à travers le monde, comme ici à Rome. Je suis sûre qu'en ce moment, elle nous regarde et qu'elle va nous aider. Ce soir, mon cœur est triste, très triste. Du monde entier, les messages ne cessent d'affluer pour saluer la mémoire de celle qui restera comme un symbole universel de la bonté. Le pape a appris la nouvelle avec douleur et émotion, selon le Vatican. Il l'a considérée comme une femme qui a marqué l'histoire de ce siècle. Pour le cardinal archevêque de Paris, Monseigneur Lustiger, c'est une voix nécessaire qui se tait. Même émotion chez Jacques Chirac, pour qui il y a désormais dans le monde moins d'amour et moins de lumière. Pour Bill Clinton, elle était tout simplement extraordinaire, un géant de ce monde. Des honneurs que la frêle dame au sari blanc a toujours refusés de son vivant. La religieuse disait qu'elle accomplissait simplement la volonté de Dieu.
Mère Teresa avait fondé son propre ordre religieux, les missionnaires de la Charité. Aujourd'hui, la congrégation compte 4000 religieuses réparties dans une bonne centaine de pays. Mère Teresa était devenue prix Nobel de la paix en 1979. Une apparence plutôt menue, fragile, mais une extraordinaire volonté. Son portrait avec Hervé Dino.
Au nom des affamés, des va-nu-pieds, des sans-abri, des estropiés, des aveugles, en leur nom à tous, j'accepte ce prix Nobel.
Après avoir œuvré dans l'ombre durant 30 ans au profit des enfants abandonnés, des vieillards et des lépreux, en 1979, Sœur Teresa est projetée sous les feux de l'actualité. La renommée internationale que lui vaut ce prix Nobel de la paix obligera cette femme à la frêle silhouette, éternellement drapée dans un habit blanc au liseré bleu, à jouer la carte de la médiatisation. En 1986, âgée de 76 ans, elle demandera bien au pape la permission de souffler un peu et d'abandonner l'avant-scène. Mais Jean-Paul II la lui refusera. Elle est devenue un symbole. Elle doit continuer à plaider la cause des plus démunis de par le monde. Sœur Teresa partage alors son temps entre les congrès internationaux et l'ordre des missionnaires de la Charité qu'elle a créé en 1950 à Calcutta. Un ordre aujourd'hui implanté dans 70 pays. Bien que victime de 2 infarctus, en avril 1993, elle est encore présente aux côtés du pape lors de son voyage officiel en Albanie, le pays d'où sont originaires ses parents. Agnès Biaksou, qui deviendra plus tard Sœur Teresa, elle est née en 1910 dans la province yougoslave toute proche de Macédoine. À 18 ans, elle entre dans une congrégation de sœurs irlandaises qui très vite l'envoie au noviciat de Calcutta. Là, durant 20 ans, elle enseignera la géographie aux jeunes filles bengalis de bonne famille. Mais en 1948, elle abandonne les sœurs de Lorette pour revêtir le sari et se consacrer uniquement aux déshérités des bidonvilles. Dans ce mouroir, installé dans le temple de Cali, les missionnaires de la Charité accueillent, soignent et partagent les derniers instants des plus démunis, quelle que soit leur religion. Sœur Teresa avait coutume de résumer son action en une formule. Ils ont vécu comme des bêtes, qu'ils meurent au moins comme des hommes.
Et l'un des hommes en France qui connaissait le mieux Mère Teresa est le journaliste et écrivain Dominique Lapierre. Il a consacré un livre, La Cité de la Joie, à son action à Calcutta. Il vient d'ailleurs de terminer un film qui retrace aussi son action. Interview réalisée par Judith Soula.
Ce soir, je me sens, moi, personnellement, un peu orphelin. Je crois que le monde est orphelin parce que le message de la mère Teresa était tellement universel. C'était un message d'amour, de foi, de partage, de compassion. Et cette grande voix, aujourd'hui, s'est tue et c'est quelque chose.
She had an inner power. She had a certitude. She knew where she was going, and it's the power that you usually associate with active people in the worldly sense. But hers was devoted to, as she said, the poorest of the poor, and being somebody for those who had no one. And that's just incredible.
That was former California Governor Jerry Brown, who worked with Mother Teresa some years ago. Former United States President George Bush says, quote, "Barbara and I had the greatest respect for Mother Teresa. If there ever was a human being who truly did the Lord's work, it was this wonderful woman." The evangelist Billy Graham adds, quote, "She was one of the most humble and sweetest of God's servants. She has taught us the true meaning of love." Now to Bernie in London.
And here, a prelude to
in Calcutta. Joining us now on the telephone from Los Angeles is the Reverend Billy Graham, well-known evangelist in the United States. Reverend Graham, there were many, many people who have helped the poor. What was different about Mother Teresa?
I think that Mother Teresa had a compassion for the poor and the oppressed and the downtrodden and even the dying. Of course, she had a home for the dying, and I visited her on 2 occasions at that place and have been with her on a number of other occasions. And I remember once in Washington, she was speaking at a prayer breakfast for the president, and the president held one point of view on a moral issue and she held another, and she spoke very boldly for her point of view. And I'll never forget how the president said to me afterward, he said, "I wish I had that kind of faith." And I think she lived by faith, and she was beautiful on the inside as Princess Di was on the outside.
Reverend Graham, it's one thing to help the poor in a city. She started her work in Calcutta, but she ended up being influential around the world. What strength did she have that you don't see in such a frail, small person?
Her strength came from God. She spent a great deal of time in prayer, and she spent a great deal of time in meditation and studying the scriptures. And she was loyal to not only God, but to her church. And I think that her strength came from God.
And one other question, Reverend Graham, when you see Mother Teresa, you see the outpouring of sympathy about Princess Diana, what does that say about what human beings are seeking these days?
I think that people today are searching for security. They're searching for something beyond materialism, and they're searching for something beyond this life. I think that the fact that the death of these 2 women, remarkable women, in 1 week has captured the hearts of the whole world. And I think that we may be on the beginning of a spiritual renewal throughout the world, because a great many people are praying that have never prayed before.
Well, Reverend Billy Graham joining us on the telephone from Los Angeles, we thank you very much for those thoughts.